Perfect.
Adnan Virk is with us today. He's going to give us his Oscar picks. The reason we've got Adnan here is I watch ESPN all day long, or listen to the radio, or do a combination of both. And you host Baseball Tonight. You're a fill-in host on a lot of the shows that I watch, like Mike and Mike and with Russillo. So I always am amused when you throw in your latest movie reviews, or you'll say, "Hey, I watched the SAG Awards this weekend," and the person opposite you, well, their eyes will start to glaze over.
No, I appreciate it, Chris. It's interesting. First of all, thank you so much for watching and being aware of my work. On Baseball Tonight, let's say, our college football coverage, it's a lot tougher to kind of sneak in my passion for cinema. You can, make a reference to Looking Like the Grizzly Bear and The Revenant, or make a joke about one of those films that people have seen. But like you said, to really dive in to show my passion and knowledge, I can really only do that on radio. And it's a credit to ESPN Radio and guys like Russillo who have been like, yeah, okay, you know what? If there's 12 segments in a show, in a 3-hour show, here's one that's just going to be Adnan, and you can get as wacky as you want. You want to talk BAFTA awards, you want to talk the SAGs, you want to talk about the DGAs. Like, all right, like maybe some of our audience has no idea what they're talking about, but you're passionate about it. And I think you know this in your line of work. I think in everyone's line of work. Some of it has to be for yourself. And oftentimes in ESPN, we joke about playing the hits. And it's like, all right, you just want to just keep talking about Peyton Manning or whatever the most important topic is that people feel like that's going to generate the most topics in terms of hits, whether, watching it, conversations, et cetera. So, the easy ones, of course, are NFL and college football and LeBron James and NBA, et cetera. But sometimes you just got to do things for yourself. And, I'm Canadian, so I want to talk about hockey, and I'm a big movie geek, so I want to talk about how I watched Gangs of New York again the other day, how much I loved it. And if people are into that, sometimes you go, that's fine. You can go find something else on the radio for 4 minutes. We'll get back to LeBron James, the NBA trade deadline, and other stuff later on.
I'm surprised more sports fans don't get into this, the prediction world of like awards, because it's actually tougher in a way. I mean, at least in sports, you've usually got one, team A versus team B. Here you've got, in a given category, some of these Oscar ones seem a little easy this year, but you got 5 people or 6 people sometimes to figure out, or 6 movies to figure out what's going to win.
That's a great point. Like if you look at the MVP races in any major sport, there's always 2 or 3 guys that stand out. You look at, like you said, you're a college football fan. You look at the Heisman. You got 3 or 4 guys that make the trip to New York, and from there it's pretty straightforward. And you're right. In every race, you're going to have front runners and people that can pull off upsets. But I think with the Oscars, it's tougher. And it's funny, though, you're right. As a sports fan, people are always looking to odds and to gambling and things like that. I love the movies, and I've always been passionate about cinema. So, it seems natural that the Oscars would be an outlet of that. But as sports fans, I'll get all these tweets going, all right, I'm trying to win some money. Who do you like for best animated short? And I'm like, okay, if I can try to help you win some bucks, that's fine. I'm just watching the Oscars because I love the pageantry of the movies. But you're right, that same competitive gene is something that both sports fans have and movie fans have. And I think it's a lot of fun. People often ask me, they go, well, how in the world can you know what's going to be nominated months in advance? It's a credit to goldderby.com and to other websites that are out there that you can track these things throughout the year. I mean, already right now, guys like you and me are like, yeah, I already know what are going to be some of the contenders for next year's Oscars. Like, that's just the way the world works. And once you're a part of it, once you're ingrained in it, it's a really cool thing.
Well, we launch our Oscar Prediction Center usually like late August, which people say that's way too early. You're so wrong. But that's the fun of it. You can actually go into our charts and you could click a date and you could go back to, say, September 10th and see who we were picking in different races and go, wow, are we stupid?
Absolutely. It's a great point, Chris. I was looking at, just for my own amusement, looking at the movies that I thought would be major contenders this year and didn't even cause a ripple. And it's like Our Brand is Crisis with Sandra Bullock, Billy Bob Thornton, right? Maybe a nomination there. Nothing. Suffragette, I would have put money on. Carey Mulligan. It's about the women's voter rights movement. Meryl Streep, not a sniff. Carol, I would have said guaranteed Best Picture nomination. Like when it came out, I'm like, oh, okay, considering the subject matter, Todd Haynes is a really talented director. He should be up for nomination, completely snubbed. So I think that's part of the joy, is trying to say, oh, this one's a no-brainer. Oh, wait, didn't even get nominated. And then Mad Max, which I saw in June, I said, oh, my goodness, this is the best action movie I've seen in 10 years, and I'm not an action movie aficionado at all. How great would it be if movies like this were recognized at the Oscars? And lo and behold, I'm still incredulous. I don't know about you, but I'm like, Mad Max is up for Best Picture and Best Director, and I think it's going to win the most Oscars of any movie. Like, that to me is incredible, and I love it.
Well, let's talk about your predictions. Anybody that wants to see them, your handle now on Gold Derby is I Love Scorsese. So people can do that search under the users and look at all 24 categories. We don't have time to go through them all today, but this Best Picture race is really befuddling all of us over the last few weeks. we think it's probably narrowed down to The Revenant, The Big Short, and Spotlight, although Mad Max, like you say, may win the most. So based on everything that's happened over the last couple of weeks, why do you have The Revenant winning Best Picture?
It's so funny too, Chris. As people often ask, what's your prediction? It's always what will win and what should win. So that's how I always want to answer every one of these questions. So I feel what should win should be Spotlight. I mean, I adored that film. And it's one of those that, as you know, the Toronto Film Festival where I'm from is always that kind of launching pad for so many of these films that are contenders. And, Spotlight was there, and in the past, The King's Speech and American Beauty and so on and so forth. So I remember seeing it and going, wow, this is an incredible film and it's brilliant. But I'm like, it's going to be definitely the critics' choice. I don't know if it's going to resonate with a large enough group. And sometimes films that are not blockbusters, like a 12 Years a Slave, which are critical darlings as well, can win that Best Picture because they're important historically. And certainly that was about slavery. And this is about the sex abuse victims involved with the Catholic Church, et cetera. But I remember watching it going, geez, this is the best movie of the year, but it's going to be hard to try to get voter turnout. And then I see The Revenant, and I liked it, but I didn't love it. I thought it was really self-important and a little too long, but I can admit that it's gorgeously shot, and Leo's going to win another Oscar, and I think Inarritu's going to win for directing. So I feel like The Revenant just has a little bit more momentum, and it appeals to a broader base. It kind of feels like one of these classic revenge stories, and it's very elemental and stark in that respect. And it's interesting, as you know, sometimes people think, oh, the Golden Globe, that's a predictor. That's actually a terrible predictor of success because the Hollywood Foreign Press is such a small kind of group that has nothing to do really with the actors branch, which is the biggest part of the Oscars. So that's where I started to say, well, maybe Spotlight, because the actors are the biggest branch of the Academy, and Spotlight really is an actor's showcase. I always think of that when the worst Best Picture of our lifetime, Crash, beat Brokeback Mountain in 2004, and go, of course, all the actors loved it. It's set in L.A., and they're all self-absorbed, so that's how it won. So that's where I want to push for Spotlight, but ultimately I go, all right, Golden Globe, Directors Guild Award for Inarritu, BAFTA Awards just happened in England. That was The Revenant as well. It's got more momentum. You mentioned The Big Short. I was surprised it won the PGA, the Producers Guild Award. So I'm like, all right, that does throw a wrench in things because generally that PGA is a decent indicator of the Best Picture winner. But I think that's an anomaly this year. To really upset the apple cart, it would be awesome if Mad Max won Best Picture, but I don't think it's going to happen. It's going to be The Revenant.
I have moved to The Revenant as well. I said after last year, I switched to Boyhood because of BAFTA. And Birdman had won PGA, and I said, whatever PGA says from here forward, I'm just going to go with it. But Revenant is just such on that moving, skyrocketing train right now that can't be stopped, it seems like.
Are you with me, though? Did you think – I'm not saying it's overrated. I thought it was a good film, but I certainly didn't think it was the best picture of the year.
Well, Marcus Dixon on our staff, one of our senior writers, we went to a screening together weeks before it opened, and when we walked out of the theater, he said, "Oh, that's your Best Picture winner, and Leo's winning, and Tom Hardy's winning." And I said, "You liked it that much?" He said, "It's just got that epic feel," and that's kind of I think what people are. And it from the box office standpoint, it's out now, just consuming tons of money. So I think that never hurts.
No, you're right. That was my fear with Spotlight. I go, this is the kind of movie that's going to make 30 or 40 million and going to win every Critics Award. And it won the Screen Actors Guild Award for Best Ensemble and the Critics' Choice Award. It won Best Picture. But to your point, The Revenant, I mean, it's made hundreds of millions of dollars. And I do think it helps the fact that DiCaprio is such a lock for actor because you start to go, all right, people are already seeing it for Leo, and it helps the feeling of this film feels bigger when you go, hey, the film that finally won Leonardo DiCaprio Best Actor Oscar also won Best Picture and also allowed Inarritu to go back-to-back for directors. So I agree with you. It just feels like there's too much momentum there, even if I don't think it is the best movie of the year.
Yeah, Inarritu, it's been 5 or 6 decades since a director went back-to-back, but no director has helmed two Best Pictures back-to-back. So that's kind of a negative going in.
You're right. That's a great stat because a part of me, and I don't know if you're like this too, because then this goes back to sports. Sometimes I'm trying to think of an analogy in sports, but I mean, let's say it was Bryce Harper, okay? He just won the MVP in the National League. If he had another great year this year, what ends up happening is you always mark against history, and you go, all right, how many back-to-back National League MVPs have there been? And you start seeing the list and go, it was only Stan Musial and whoever else, and you go, geez, are we really going to put him in that kind of echelon? So to your point, I think when you go, hang on, Inarritu's going to be the only guy that went back-to-back Oscars and back-to-back Best Picture winners in how many years? And as you mentioned from my handle, like I'm obsessed with Martin Scorsese, and he's only won one Best Director Oscar ever. Like, is Inarritu really going to win back-to-backs? Like when Hanks went back-to-back for acting, for Forrest Gump in Philadelphia, reverse the order, Philadelphia, Forrest Gump. But I'm like, it felt like it was the right move for a lot of people because both films were just so special and he was just so good. With Inarritu, I don't feel like this is a lock. Like, I do feel, sorry, I should say this. I do think it's a lock he's going to win. Like, that's the prediction. But I would love to see George Miller win because I think if you're a sentimentalist and the real Hollywood geeks would go, hang on, this guy's in his 70s. He worked in this film for over a decade. It's a real cult hit. For it to come out and to be a roaring success, both commercially and critically, I mean, you know how snobbish critics can get. And I mean, I'm a wannabe film critic myself, but if a film makes a lot of money and it's a big action movie and it's a popcorn picture, you can feel the critics get a little bit dismissive. For all of them to overwhelmingly jump on board, like I'm a big Ty Burke fan of the Boston Globe. He said this film's enough to reaffirm your faith in movies, like not just action movies, like all of cinema. So I'm like, I would love to see George Miller get a director nod. Again, if you want to go body of work, which as you know is often how these things work, and that's how DiCaprio's going to win his best actor. That's not his best performance, but he certainly is deserving, and he's great in the film. Then I think George Miller should win. I have a real issue with years from now we're going to say Alejandro González Iñárritu, who's a really good director, won back-to-back best directors along with best pictures. That's a little tough for me.
Within the scope of 53 weeks, going back to last year, he will have won 5 Oscars.
That's insanity to me. Like, are you kidding? Like, and again, I know it's not his fault, but I'm like, Hitchcock never won a competitive Oscar. Like, Scorsese finally won for The Departed. Like, so many of these other great directors were overrated and over. Some of them were overrated, and some of them were glossed over when they should have won. So I think the Oscars are all about history and patronage in cinema. That's why they have the montages showing, great musicals of the past or westerns, whatever the theme is they pick. That seems odd. Like, that's the kind of thing you should be hearing about Orson Welles. So you shouldn't be saying that about Iñárritu, as good a director as he is. 5 Oscars in 53 weeks? Are you kidding me?
Let's talk. You mentioned DiCaprio. We'll skip that one for a moment. I think almost everybody's picking him now.
Yeah.
Stallone. You're a sports fan. Sylvester Stallone, after 40 years of playing Rocky, it looks like he's going to take this, even though he doesn't have the SAG nomination. He'd be only the 3rd person to win at the Oscars without a SAG nomination since they started. Do you think he's guaranteed, or is there somebody right behind him?
I do, Chris, and I was really hesitant to think he would win. I was reluctant to see Creed. I remember seeing the trailers and going, oh, God, enough, right? Uncle, I got the Rocky stories, like, we're good. And I'm aware that Coogler directed it and Michael B. Jordan. I'm like, oh, I love Fruitvale Station. That gives me a little bit of reason to see it. But I was in no rush. Only once I started hearing, hey, you know what? Stallone might win an Oscar for this. I said, all right, well, as a wannabe film critic and Oscar prognosticator, I have to go see this now. And I was pleasantly surprised. I'll say this. With the film itself, I was like, he actually was very good in the movie, and he had a couple of people haven't seen it, a couple of really wonderful moments, very poignant, and he underplayed it, and he really knows that character as well as anybody. And so I thought after watching it, well, this is a joke if he wins, but if he's nominated, I wouldn't have an issue with it. I actually loved his work in Copland years ago and was fighting that he should have been nominated for that. So I'm like, I actually think he's been a good actor more than people probably recognize, and more than just Rocky Balboa. But the fact he's going to win sickens me. I thought Ruffalo was incredible in Spotlight. I mean, I thought he was the heart of the film. For a movie in which every actor is so subtle and so understated, he had the affectations of his character and the little idiosyncrasies of him, like, down to a T. And again, as somebody who's been in journalism, or if you want to call sportscasting, want to be journalism, fine. All the little details that they have right, the rumpled shirts, the cold pizza, the leads that you're following, the lack of glamour in the job. And I thought he nailed the essence of that. I think he's more deserving. I think that Tom Hardy is fantastic in The Revenant. I'm starting to gain some traction with those people saying, you know what? I think he might be better than DiCaprio in the movie, even though Leo's going to win the movie. He reminded me, Hardy, of Berenger in Platoon, right? The villain, that one campfire scene was kind of like the scene in the barracks where Berenger's thinking, oh, you guys think this is reality? I am reality. And I thought he was a really good villain. And Hardy's a really good young actor. He's 38. He's going to be in a lot more other good movies. So this is one of those that I go, all right, I don't want to be the Grinch. I get that the Oscars are all about sentimentality, and Stallone's done a lot for cinema and for film. But the fact he's going to win an Oscar for Creed does rankle me a little bit. When they announce his name, I'm going to go, I hope people still go watch Mark Ruffalo in Spotlight because he's great in that film.
So no Stallone visit to any of your ESPN shows.
Well, it's funny.
After he sees this.
Well, it's funny, Chris, because people assume, they go, oh, you're a sports guy. Okay, you probably loved Creed. Oh, you're a big boxing fan. And I go, no, I'm not that guy going, I had to go watch Creed. Like, I like boxing, sure. I like the sport enough as it is. I think it's become a niche sport. And the movies themselves, the first Rocky is great. Again, it bothers me to no end that Taxi Driver lost to it for Best Picture and Network and All the President's Men. But whatever, I get it. Right, it's an iconic film. But aside from that, I'm not one of those guys who goes, oh, I got to go watch the new Rocky. I mean, I was okay with the last Rocky Balboa. I thought Stallone did a decent job with that. It was fun, and it made up for the atrocity that was Rocky V. I wasn't one of those that thought Creed was robbed of a Best Picture nomination or Michael B. Jordan. I thought the consolation of a nomination for Stallone was fine. The win is going to be upsetting me.
We've all got Brie Larson. She's won everything leading up to the Oscars on Best Actress. But Best Supporting Actress, you know, I have felt a while it would be Alicia Vikander, and that's my prediction. That's your prediction.
Yeah.
But Kate Winslet coming on strong.
Yeah, I'm going to go with Vikander only because of the SAG Award. I mean, you know, last year the SAG Awards ended up predicting it 4 for 4 with regards to the actors. And as you pointed out, Stallone doesn't have a SAG nomination, so we're not going to see what happened a year ago. And that was actually why I thought when Stallone got nominated for the Golden Globe, I said, all right, well, the Golden Globe, that's always a little bit more, broad and mainstream. It's not necessarily as insular as the Screen Actors Guild. He'll get a Golden Globe, but if he doesn't get the Screen Actors Guild, he'll probably get snubbed for an Oscar nomination. He gets a nomination, I go, okay, whatever, fine, I guess it is what it is. With Vikander, I was like, okay, I think supporting actress is notoriously unpredictable year to year. And so I'm like, I just like to go ahead and follow recent history and go with the SAG. I am pulling for Kate Winslet to win. I thought she was terrific in Steve Jobs because that to me is one of the most overlooked movies of the year. That's one where I think if it had made a little bit more money and it hadn't been pulled so quickly from the studio and people had seen it, it would have more momentum because it was well directed by Boyle. I'm still aghast that Sorkin wasn't nominated for screenplay. Like, nobody has to cry for him. He's won Oscars and he's been rewarded, and everyone knows how talented and prolific he is. But I thought Steve Jobs, Chris, was one of the most monumental achievements. Like, to take a man's story and to structure it as a 3-act play was wildly creative. You've got great performances from Fassbender, Jeff Daniels, Seth Rogen playing against type in, a more dramatic, serious role. And Winslet to me is so impressive because Fassbender is this roaring, volcanic fury and egomaniac, and she's the one that grounds him. And, it's another example how Kate Winslet's kind of like Meryl Streep. She gives it the Polish accent. She's a little bit more softer, and yet she ends up stealing scenes away from this guy because she's so good and so good as an actress. And she's only won once before for the readers, so I'm like, it would make sense that she's probably one of those actresses that you feel like, like a Julianne Moore, that she probably should have more than one Oscar by now. So that was what I kind of struggle with my prediction on Goldberry.com because I really want Winslet to win. I think she has momentum. I'm just going to go with the SAG Award and go with Vikander, who is not only good in The Danish Girl, and I think Hollywood would like to recognize that film on a social level, being about the first transgender, and Redmayne's not going to win. But also Vikander is really good in Ex Machina. And I think sometimes people go, you know what, let's go 2 for 1. A little bit of that was with Pacino in 92 when he won for Sin of a Woman because he was so great in Glengarry Glen Ross as well. That was primarily obviously that Al had never won. He was long overdue. But I do think sometimes the voters go, you know what? She's great in this one, but she was also really good in the other one. All right, 2 for 1. Let's just give it to her.
Well, she had like 6 movies this past year. So
That's true.
They could be rewarding her on all kinds of different levels.
Yeah.
Steve Jobs was my second favorite movie of the year. Inside Out actually was my favorite.
Way to go, Chris.
What were your top 3 favorite movies of this past year?
I went with Spotlight was my favorite. I love The Hateful Eight, and I'm a huge Tarantino fan. And I thought, again, at least give him a screenplay nomination. Like, I get those. That to me is the epitome of a love it or hate it Tarantino film. That if you're into his stuff, you're going to love the dialogue, the nonlinear structure, robust performances, excessive
Walton Goggins should have gotten it.
Hyper violence, a great Ennio Morricone score. It's beautifully shot. I was in love with it. And I saw the Roadshow edition. I'm like, this is incredible. You got an intermission, you have an overture. I'm like, this is like movie heaven. So I wasn't shocked when it was ignored a little bit because, again, he's received plenty of his accolades from the Academy. But I love The Hateful Eight, and along with Spotlight. And I had Inside Out at 5. I had Steve Jobs at 4. Mad Max is my 3. So overall, my top 5 similar to yours, and I do think Steve Jobs. And Inside Out overlooked. Listen, it's going to win animation, and I'm glad it's up for screenplay, although it's going to lose for Spotlight. But it really should be up for Best Picture. That's a beautiful film. Like, I've got 2 kids, and I would have seen it with or without my children. I saw it actually, in fact, without my children the second time. Like, that's a wonderful story. And those guys at Pixar, I mean, the way that they can wax these stories that are so emotionally stirring and poignant, and yet can still involve children. I mean, it's like such a magical act what they do. Like to be able to have this theme that everyone needs sadness in life, as sadness is what ends up being a part of happiness. Like that's pretty deep stuff for an animated film. And Bing Bong is stealing the movie. Richard Karn, the great character actor. I mean, it's crazy how good the movie is.
You mentioned Hateful Eight. You've got that winning score. I've got it in second place for score. I have a feeling on his 50th nomination, there may be a lot of sentimentality to give John Williams the Oscar there for, and he hasn't won in over 20 years for the Star Wars sequel.
Yeah, I could see that. You're right. I mean, again, if you want to go more of like a populist pick, everyone knows the name John Williams. They know how big composer he's been. Star Wars, for many was ignored and maybe should have had a Best Picture nomination. I thought it was great. I didn't think it was a criminal misjustice that's not for Best Picture, but it was better than I thought it would be. And credit to J.J. Abrams for kind of reigniting the franchise. So you're right. I wouldn't be surprised if Williams wins, but Morricone's never won. And I mean, this is like the Italian maestro in spaghetti westerns.
But do they know that? That's my only concern. Is I think the studio or whoever's been campaigning they've dropped, you need to establish storylines. Right. I think the Leo people have really done a good job of saying, not only do we know you love this performance, but hey, by the way, he's never won before. Right. Morricone, you haven't heard that storyline, and I don't think people know it.
You're right about that, because I didn't even know it until Tarantino accepted his award, I think at the Globes. I went up there and he goes, listen, he's the best composer of all time. And I'm not talking film composer. I'm talking composer. He goes, Beethoven, Tchaikovsky, whatever. And he said, he's never won any of these. He's never won any awards. So to your point, you're right. They should have done a better job of going, this guy's a real film icon. This is his one shot. He's 80. He's in a Tarantino film. Like, it's the one thing the movie should win. You're right. I think they have dropped the ball with doing that. Hopefully enough people recognize it. And I think if you actually do listen to the scores individually, I do think it's a great score. Like music alone, it really tells that story, that kind of lurching noise. You can picture the stagecoach moving forward in the Civil War era. It's really cool.
I do think it's one of the two. Now, screenplay, you mentioned, you've got Spotlight. You've also got The Big Short. I think everybody is pretty much on board with those two winning. Is there anything at all that could upset the apple cart there?
The only thing I thought maybe Inside Out for screenplay for original, because it is a wonderful story and it's got really inventive characters, and it would be a real win for animation to prove that we're not just going to win Best Animated Feature every time. Like, you can actually nominate us for Best Picture, and that we're more than that, and that writing is a really important part of an animated picture. But I just think Spotlight, what's going to happen is, Chris, it's not going to win picture and director, so the constellation becomes, all right, we'll give it the screenplay award. And oftentimes, the best movies are often the best written ones. And plus, McCarthy, who's the co-screenwriter, is also the director. So it's another way of honoring Tom McCarthy, who's been a really good journeyman actor for years, and he's done great movies, which I've loved on the indie circuit. I don't know how mainstream they've been, but The Visitor with Richard Jenkins I loved, Win-Win with the great Paul Giamatti and Bobby Cannavale, Jeffrey Tambor. So I think that's a good way of recognizing a guy who's a talent, who made one of the best pictures of the year. It wasn't seen by enough people. Maybe the subject matter is a little bit too serious. But also an example of how you really write a great script. Like, you're basing this on a true story. You're culling together all these newspaper clippings, making a riveting story of a serious subject matter. So I think that Spotlight's going to win. Maybe Inside would have the upset edge. And for adapted, I just think, the Michael Lewis book, I haven't read it, but those that have tell me, like, it is engrossing and very complicated. And the way that, Adam McKay, certainly as a director, was able to tell the story, but even the writing to say, all right, let's streamline this. Let's try to simplify this. Let's make the banking and financial industry as accessible as possible. And again, I think it helps that if you're a Best Picture nominee, that's not going to win anything else. So therefore, I think Spotlight, Big Short will get those prizes, helped by the fact they're also up for Best Picture.
Yeah, and the word I kept hearing on that book was unadaptable. People were shocked that they were able to make an entertaining movie out of that book.
Yeah, you try to tell people about it, and it's funny. You go, wait, what's it about? And you go, what's about the fall of the financial crisis? It's hilarious. Oh, really funny how people lost their money. No, but you just have to see how they did it. It's so audacious. We got Margot Robbie in a bathtub, and Selena Gomez is here, and all the performances. I know Bale's up for supporting actor, Chris, but I thought Steve Carell was a lock. I thought he was sensational. I thought for sure he's your supporting actor nominee, because he's not only funny, but he has the pathos and the drama to show how serious is what these guys are doing. Like that final scene on the rooftop there, he's the sole guy. He's the one shark who has the conscience, and like he's making a ton of money off this. But once he sees what's happening, he connects the dots. He goes, hang on a second, people are losing their homes all over the place. This is what the foreclosure business is. I thought Carell was wonderful. I would have liked to have seen him nominated.
My theory on Bale getting in over his co-stars was that if you think about it, the other three at some point all interact with each other. Gosling and Carell are in several scenes together, but Christian Bale never has one moment with any of the other three people. So it felt like it was like he was in his own little movie.
Yeah, that's a good point. And I do think it helps. The Academy loves these roles that they're kind of eccentric and a little bit strange. Like Carell's character, it's interesting because he's a comedic actor playing a straight role, and he was nominated for Foxcatcher before, so he's proven he can do it. But Bale, it just kind of taps into that persona of really weird Christian Bale and method acting, and he's, you know, he doesn't wear socks and shoes, and he's drumming all the time, and he's kind of got a bit of an overbite. He's like, I think the Academy does love those idiosyncrasies, and they kind of fall for those eccentricities a little bit. And I think he's the guy that they like, and they see him in those kinds of roles, and they'll recognize him for that.
As my boss always says, it's not best acting, it's most acting.
Yeah,
that's what they're looking for.
That's what he used to always say about Nicolas Cage. Your boss is a smart man. Whenever Nick Cage does something, I go, it's not best acting, it's most acting when it comes to Nick Cage.
Well, he says that about all the, I mean, especially like editing. Like, it's most editing, not best editing.
Yeah, that's true too. Sometimes I laugh. I go, why can't a Best Picture winner have good editing if it's just solidly constructed? Because that's an important part of the film, like knowing which take to go and how to build the drama and the pacing. But yeah, it's always the one that has the most cuts and that's the most frenetically done. Like if it's frenetic, that's going to win the best editing. So it's always like an action picture, like a Mad Max should win or like The Revenant should win. And those are well edited, but I think The Big Short was really well edited too. And it's not an action movie.
Well, this has been so much fun today. It's probably the most you've gotten to talk about movies on a camera probably in years, right?
Well, I was thrilled, Chris, when you reached out to me, because I always laugh with people and they say, oh, you're a sportscaster at ESPN, must be your dream job. And I go, actually, my dream job was to be Martin Scorsese. That didn't work out. Then I wanted to be Al Pacino. And that didn't work out. Then I wanted to be Roger Ebert. And that didn't work out. So this sportscasting thing's been pretty good, but it's actually fourth on my list of dream jobs. And I still think, like, I'm 37. I'm young enough. I can still kind of make an entryway. I can segue from sportscaster / film critic and create this unique hybrid role. So I really appreciate you giving me the platform to give some of my knowledge and my passion. It's just I just love fellow film lovers and fellow cinephiles and the job that you guys are doing there, the website. It's really cool for me. So I really appreciate it.
Well, this might be your audition. Somebody in the industry probably going to see this.
Yeah, that would be fantastic. That's all. One of my bosses once told me, he goes, why don't you work in entertainment? And I said, you know what? I would like to go talk about Ennio Morricone for 30 minutes. Or I'd want to tell you about, you know, why Scorsese's King of Comedy is like one of the most underrated movies of all time. That's not what entertainment shows are. It's like 20 minutes of why Justin Bieber took his shirt off at St. Bart's. So until they segue to the more highbrow edition of entertainment, then I can make the more natural transition. But if I could just pop on for a couple minutes to talk movies. The other thing, too, is the Oscars are on ABC, which is the parent company of ESPN. So I really have confidence, Chris. One of these days, I'm going to find a way to get to the red carpet and say, all right, I'm filing stories here for ESPN. If there's ever a sports film that can really make a push and be like the best picture, then maybe I'll be on the red carpet and I'll see you down there too.
Sounds great. Thanks so much.
All right, Chris, I appreciate it. Be well.